when using brand colors and depicting data, not to use those brand colors to depict negative data. So if you're showing a dashboard and everything's crashing and you're using brand colors, it might start to build this negative association with the brand. In other cases where I mentioned that if the brand colors are sort of out there, like a bright red, you might not want to use that color for comparing your company with its competitors.
Welcome to the MindSpeaking podcast, where we talk about the human side of data. In other words, data, communication, and personal development. My name is Gilbert Eikelenboom. I'm driven by curiosity, and my aim is to spread insights that you can apply in your life starting today. So, let's do it. Let's start MindSpeaking. Data visualization, colors, and running. That's what we talked about today. Because today I talked to Kate Strachnyi. She's the founder of DATAcated, and you might know her from LinkedIn. She built a career in data, working for companies like Deloitte, but then started her own business. And on the side, she has written 5 books for data professionals, and one even for kids, data literacy for kids. So I really like that perspective. One of the books she has written and recently published is called ColorWise. And it's a book we talk about today, because we talk about the 3 different colors that you can use in your data visualization. At least the 3 types of colors. Then we talk about the frequent mistakes that many people make and when to use brand colors, when is it appropriate to use them. Next, we also talk about what cultural differences should we take into account when picking colors for our data visualizations, and how our topic of our data visualization or presentation influences the choice of our colors. So I've learned a lot today, and I hope you will as well, about how to be more intentional with color in your data visualizations. Because of course, you probably know that it matters what type of colors you pick, but how to do that, that's what we'll discussing. So let's dive in with the conversation of Kate Strachnyi. Kate, great to have you today.
Gilbert, hello. MindSpeaking, I love it. Great to be here.
Thank you. Lots of colors in the background, and that's something we're going to talk about today. You see some blue here in the back for the people on YouTube, some colorful books here, and a lot of colors in your background as well. And that's also something you have been writing about, right? So ColorWise, the book that came out recently. So I'm excited to dive into ColorWise to help data professionals be more intentional with color. I really like that tagline because I think many people are aware that color is important, but how to be a bit more intentional is so important. And I would love to dive in there. But before we do so, let's give a little bit of background about your story, because right now you live in the US. You told me it's very cold right now. The kids are to school with a big scarf, and but it was not always the case. You know, you did not always live in the US. You did not always have this successful company. So tell us a bit about the first years of Kate.
Okay, yeah, first year. So the cold winter night, Kate was born. Actually, it was February, so I was born in February. I was born in Tajikistan, and we moved to the US when I was almost 9 years old. Quick fun story, I didn't go to school there. So now my kids are in 1st and 3rd grade. And when I came to America, my first time in school was in 4th grade. And I keep reminding them I didn't speak English, I didn't know math, I barely read and wrote in Russian because I didn't go to school. And so every time they complain about not understanding, I'm like, well, now imagine not knowing the language, right? So it's always fun to bring that up.
And how did they respond to that?
Oh, I don't know. They're like, oh, please, I can learn. They're learning Russian now. So they're like, this is easy. I'm like, okay, it's not the same, but they obviously can't relate. They're too young. But it was a fun journey for sure. Trying to get up to speed really fast, knowing that absolutely everyone is ahead of you in 4th grade. So I pushed myself pretty hard. By 6th grade, I was in honors English, which was pretty fun because I didn't speak the language before, and then I was in honors. I really applied myself to school, probably because I didn't have many friends, right? So it was hard to make friends when you don't speak English. But then I'll fast forward. Graduated college with a 4-year degree in 3 years because I simply could not wait to be done with school. and went off into the corporate world. I worked several jobs before that, but I started in finance, went into risk management, regulatory compliance, consulting, finally got into data analytics in like 2013-ish timeframe, about, wow, 10 years ago. And in 2020, I went off on my own with a company called DATAcated.
Awesome. Yeah, it has been quite a journey. You wrote some books on the way as well. We talked about ColorWise, the book that has been published. You told me there's another book coming. Many people ask you, where do you get the time? What I'm very interested in, because we had that conversation before, but what I'm most interested in right now is, can you share with us the first step you have taken? Because right now you have a big following, you have a big brand, but what is the first step you have taken? Was it writing a blog post, or, and do you remember that day?
Yes, I actually do remember. So I never really intended to come out and try to become an influencer or grow a following. It actually happened the moment when I was trying to break into a data career. I was doing a couple of things. One was reaching out to people on LinkedIn and saying, hey, Gilbert, you're in data. Can we talk? And then I would just have these conversations. After a couple of calls, I realized this could be really beneficial for others. So I did a couple of things. One is I started recording these 10-15 minute sessions called Humans of Data Science, where I would just interview people and ask, how did you start your career? So that sort of took off on YouTube. And at the same time, I started posting on LinkedIn. I was trying to learn Tableau and data visualization and visual best practices. And anything I learned, I decided to share on social media. And I think what kept me coming back all the time was the positive engagement. The data community is simply awesome. I think you can relate to that as well. They're so supportive, and that positive feedback just kept drawing me back. And then the more content sort of I've shared, the more people were interested in following me. And then that also inspired me to continue. It was like a snowball effect where it just kept going.
Right. And that's a great lesson as well, because I think many people overthink it. Some people, they do want to share more on LinkedIn or build a brand. They do have this intention, but they don't manage to, because they think, okay, I need to know so much, before I am this expert before sharing anything. But if you just share what you have learned that day, like you did, it can make such a big difference. And if you just teach people that are 1 year behind you or one day behind you, that's all you need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They want to come on the journey. They don't want to just hear from the experts who have accomplished everything already and probably can't even remember what it was like to struggle in learning a new concept because they're already there. So I think it's sometimes more fun to follow somebody who's early on in the career, like you said, a day behind you, a year behind you, it's or ahead of you. Sorry, it's easier to follow those.
Uh-huh. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great. And eventually you started writing books. One of them is ColorWise. We have it here. It's a great book. I was lucky enough to give a quote even for the book. And of course, before doing so, I read the book. And what I would like to start with is why is color important? Why is it relevant for the world of data?
Yeah, I think color can really help us tell a story. So humans, we're very visual creatures. We can interpret sometimes with deep thought or sometimes just out of instinct if something is good, bad, dangerous, safe, fun, depressing, sometimes even from the color choice. And I think this comes back to human nature, right? We're associating green with grass and nature and sort of the red, orangish yellow with maybe the sunrise and sort of excitement. And I think it's super hardwired into our physical, psychological, and also cultural beings where we're used to seeing things a certain way. And the reason all of that is important in data visualization is when we're visualizing data, we're communicating a story, and color simply helps us tell that story. So that's why you mentioned that tagline in the beginning. It's being intentional with color. And I think intentional use of color is sort of my number one takeaway from the whole book. Um, it's just simply taking a step back when you're creating a data visualization or telling a data story and thinking, is this the best color? Or maybe even starting in grayscale mode and start thinking, where would color make sense? Which colors make sense? And we could spend hours talking about this topic, but that's sort of the story behind why I think it's important.
Hmm. Yes. And I completely agree. And you touch upon something interesting, starting with completely gray bars or gray graphs, because I think many people start with a lot of colors and then kind of struggle what to choose, what to highlight. Um, yeah, can you share some of the frequent mistakes that people make when they use colors or data visualization in general? Because I know this is a topic you're passionate about.
Absolutely, yes. So for color specifically, I think the number one rule I see being broken is just using too many colors. I think you get to the end of your data visualization journey, it's sort of the last inch of the data analytics process. You're done with the analysis, you're done with everything. And now you're like, okay, let's just throw some color on there. So you throw 10, 15 different colors and you're like, okay, this looks better, right? Because it's color is very attractive. This is why you have so many colors behind you and I have colors behind me. It is attractive to look at versus maybe a blank wall. But there's a fine line between trying to make it look like artwork versus trying to make it communicate an effective message. And I know you're passionate about communicating effectively because I mean, I've got your book here too. So making sure that you're using communication properly to tell that story, and color can absolutely help you with that. So that's one, is using too many colors. Another common thing I see, and that one drives me absolutely mad. I think I prefer people using too many colors. So picture a dashboard, and let's say you have four different charts, and we're talking about four regions as an example, four geographic regions, and you use four colors for those four regions in chart one. Great. Let's say region A is blue. You go to another chart, now you're talking about sales across those regions. And then you're using different colors for those regions. And that is the part that sort of drives me crazy, because people start to associate a specific color with a region. And once they're in that same dashboard, they're looking at that same region, it should be the same color. Like
Yeah.
it has to be. And I think that the greater pet peeve of mine is when I see that specific orange, let's say that you use for region A, used for something completely different. And then now you're thinking you're associating that region with this other, category or item. That can be very confusing. So that's two, and I'll just list out one more. There are more, but I'll list out one more for our talk here is not paying attention to accessibility and not taking into effect the fact that some people in this world have trouble distinguishing between some types of colors. One of the most common cases is it's when green and red start to look very similar to people. It sort of looks like this greenish, brownish, not good looking color. And when we think green and red is so distinct for those with normal vision, and we use that in our data visualizations, it can be confusing and misleading to those who just simply can't tell those colors apart.
Hmm. Right. Before we start designing the visualizations, the dashboard, how can we get a better understanding of our audience in terms of not just color blindness, but also their preferences, maybe? How can we do that?
Well, I think a lot of times before our data visualization is seen by someone or before it goes to an audience, we generally know who this is going to. So as an example, if you're working at a company and you know this is going to your management team, then take the time to get to know who they are, get to know where they are geographically, because cultural and geographical aspects must be considered. Colors are interpreted in some cases vastly differently across different cultures, and in other cases, they're interpreted similarly. But you just have to take that into consideration. And my logic is, if you simply don't know your audience and you can't possibly get to know your audience, like if you're creating a dashboard in Tableau Public and you're just simply posting it out there, you have no clue who's going to find it or use it, I'd say just be very conservative and again, start with that grayscale mode and start to consider maybe using blue. Blue's probably one of the safest colors, and that's why I like your MindSpeaking in the back. It's blue. It's very safe. You're not offending anyone here, Gilbert. And I think using that color to sort of draw attention to the key points in the story that you're trying to share could be effective. But in addition to just knowing your audience, I think keeping in mind the topic that you're covering and the colors associated with that topic can really help you with your color scheme decisions. Like if you're talking about environmental data where we're looking at CO2 emissions, you can stick to sort of this orange, green, brownish colors because those are the ones associated with that field, and getting to know the colors that are associated with the specific topic you're talking about can just help make it more appropriate to your audience.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Thinking about the topic you're talking about, and when you touch upon cultural differences and taking that into account while designing your charts or your dashboards, I was wondering, are you aware of any differences between the US and Tajikistan in terms of in terms of color perception?
First of all, thanks for saying it right. Tajikistan. A lot of people can't even say that, and some have actually asked me if that's a real country. So I appreciate this.
Oh, really? I really wanted to visit sometime. I think the countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all those countries have amazing nature. A friend of mine, kind of a tangent here, but I'll keep it short. So there's a friend of mine who was in Tajikistan recently. He was hiking there with a group of friends, or not really friends, but acquaintances who are very adventurous. So they went there not just to go hiking, but to set out a trail. They wanted to discover what type of paths they can offer to people going there. He showed me some pictures. It looked fabulous. So I'm even more enthusiastic. So maybe someday we'll meet there.
No, I'm not allowed to go back, but thanks. We ran away from the country. I don't have as fond memories as you're describing. It was not great, but there were big mountains. I remember that. In terms of color, I honestly would not know because I was so young, and I mean, I dealt with chickens. That was my childhood. Like I played with chickens and cleaned up animal stuff, if you know what I'm saying. Like I lived on the farm. Um, but I think if you're thinking geographically, maybe flag colors. If you're speaking specifically about Tajikistan, I think that could be a good place to start. Or even the colors of the mountains. That's I think what most people associate it with Tajikistan.
Right. Yeah. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we design in a business situation, we often also need to think about, hey, what about brand colors, right? Can you share some tips about, is it ever appropriate to use brand colors? And
I think in a lot of cases it can be appropriate. I think it depends on the brand colors. Again, if your brand colors are blue or some sort of non-extravagant hot pink or bright red colors, I think it can be appropriate. I think you have to be careful when using brand colors and depicting data, not to use those brand colors to depict negative data. So if you're showing a dashboard and everything's crashing and you're using brand colors, it might start to build this negative association with the brand. In other cases, where I mentioned that if the brand colors are sort of out there, like a bright red, you might not want to use that color for comparing your company with its competitors. I have heard a story where a PowerPoint presentation was put together, and it was sort of a comparison of, okay, us versus them, comparing some metrics. And every time the slide came up, the us data was in red. And so the audience immediately assumed that this company was just failing on all accounts because they were red and the other ones were like bluish or greenish. And that wasn't the case. The point they were trying to make is how much they're better than their competitors, but it came out looking like a negative because this was a Western based presentation. And in the East, like in China, this would have worked because for them, the color red is more like prosperity and happiness, whereas in the US, for example, it's more like danger or we're losing money. So making sure you really think it through when you're using those brand colors.
right, right. And if you talk about, that doesn't matter what type of visualization, because we have a lot of charts that we can use, right? Does it matter what type of colors we use for which chart? Does it only have to do with the things we have discussed, like cultural differences, perception of people, the industry associations, or is there an added component about what type of chart we're using?
I think the chart type also matters. I think especially when we're talking about the number of colors that we're looking at. The more colors you add, obviously, the crazier it gets. But there are different chart types that can sort of take on more colors than others. So, and you can actually play around with this. So if you picture a pie chart, which I would be against using a pie chart for 15 slices to begin with, but let's say you're using a pie chart with 15 slices. If you've got 15 different colors on there, that is just a lot of times confusing, and you can't really keep up with which slice is which color. A lot of times we're comparing it with the color legend, going back and forth, and it's sort of a nightmare. So I think things like that, just being even more careful and potentially graying out all the slices except the one that you're really focusing in on. Color that, pick a color that makes sense for you in that situation, and stick to that color. It just helps to bring attention. And then things like scatter plots as well. If you just start adding a lot of different colors on there, that can get confusing. But something like a bar chart, I'm still against using more than 5 colors. But if you had to pick a chart that can handle more, I think it would be a bar chart, just because it's sort of easier on the eyes, and you can just make more sense of it, even if you actively try to ignore those colors. Yeah, that would be my theory on charts. It's a good question, Gilbert. I haven't given this one much thought, so that's good.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, it popped. I didn't prepare this one. It popped into my mind, but I think it makes sense because a bar chart is at least most, um, yeah, the best overview without making it too confusing. But even there, if you add too much color,
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking tree maps too. I think it has something to do with the rectangular shape that humans are just better at looking at sizes, because tree maps can also take on more. For those who don't know, a tree map is just like this big rectangle that's cut up into multiple different sizes rectangles that shows the distribution of, it's sort of like a pie chart, but in rectangles. That can probably take on more as well. So.
then one last thing about the book and something you wrote there. You talk about 3 types of colors, right? Sequential, divergent, and categorical. Of course, we don't have the visual aids right now, but is it possible to talk us through in words?
Yes, sure. Let's start. We'll start with categorical. So, categorical is basically when you're trying to assign a specific color for each category, and this goes back to the example of the 4 regions, right? Each of the 4 regions can have a specific color, and those are the colors we're going to use throughout the dashboard. In that case, this color type would be called categorical, and it's used to differentiate categories. That one's pretty straightforward. Sequential, it is essentially taking a color and going from light to dark shade. So an example I like to use is if we're demonstrating the growth of a tree or a plant, we can sort of use green and start with a very faint light green for when the plant is just seeded. And then as it grows up into a bigger plant or tree, we can have a bar chart that sort of gets darker and darker green. So you're using one shade and it's a sequential color. As the numbers grow, the colors tend to get darker. And then lastly, diverging. This is sort of going from one color to another with a central midpoint. And this is the type of color that I would generally see used for something like profit and loss, where you can have like a light orange that sort of, a darker orange that sort of gets lighter as you're in the negatives of a profit. And then in the middle, it's sort of a grayish, whitish color. And then similarly, then it goes from a light blue all the way to a darker blue as the profits get higher. So you want to be in the darker blue areas, not in the darker orange areas. And that's a diverging color type.
That's such a good explanation. Even without visual aids, I think people are
I'm
able to
trying here,
follow
yeah.
very well. So great job. One of the things you like to do outside of your job is running. And I was wondering, are you intentional with color when you put on your running clothes? Because I know some people, some friends or some people I know, they're very mindful of having matchy shoes with their shirt or whatever. Some people don't really care. So I'm curious which camp you're in.
I'm in the don't get killed camp. So I put on colors that I think will be seen on the street.
All
That's
right.
especially if I'm running at night. I want to make sure that it's reflective, and if there's a car, they can see me. But other than that, I generally don't really care too much about the colors that I'm wearing. Although I have this monthly challenge thing going on where each month I'm doing some other physical activity. And in August this year, I'm doing something called the Rainbow Run, where I will run, and I'm going to talk about the book, obviously, like when I talk about these runs, um, for each color of the rainbow. So, like red, for example, I plan to wear all red running. I just went shopping. I plan to wear all red. And since red has 3 letters, I will run 3 miles, right?
Oh
And
wow.
similarly for each color of the rainbow. And I think that gets me to about 36 miles for the month. I might include white, black, and gray because they're so important for data visualization, even though they're not officially part of the rainbow. So I might do that as well. So that's when I'll be intentional.
That sounds very intentional indeed. That would be fun to follow that.
Yeah.
So I know you get up very early, normally 5 a.m. You said you also do some night runs. Do you also do morning runs or only mostly night runs?
I actually prefer running in the morning, but sometimes for me, morning means it's going to be dark out for the majority of the run. So when I said night run, I guess I meant night out. It looks like night, but actually early morning. I have done some night runs where I actually would run from, let's say, midnight all the way through sunrise. I did that a couple times, and there's the David Goggins challenge, which I've done twice. I'm doing it again in March, where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, and that obviously leads you to doing some night running because there are times when you're running in the middle of the night. But the preference is on mornings. I like to see the sunrise.
Right. Yeah. And when I go for running, I get a lot of ideas, and it can certainly help, I think, with writing a book, right? And I would love to talk a bit about you writing the last book and the previous experiences you have with writing a book. Yeah. So what is the biggest challenge for this book specifically, ColorWise, in writing it? What is some of the biggest challenges?
I think my main challenge was trying to make it as good as I possibly can, and I'm so glad I worked with O'Reilly as a publisher because they sort of set the deadlines and goals for me. I think if it was just me writing, I would have still been writing. Like I would still be tweaking and editing all the images because I simply wanted to get it into as good shape as possible and I didn't want to miss anything. So I think my biggest challenge was just me personally being hard on myself and trying to make it as good as possible. Um, I do want to ask you what your biggest challenge was in writing your book.
Yeah, I think putting everything in a logical structure. So back when I was writing this book, I was not really frequently posting online or creating pieces of content. So I was writing the book from scratch, which made it very difficult. And then while putting my thoughts on the paper, then eventually you'll also need to organize it and have a logical flow. And my editor helped a lot with that. I only involved an editor quite late in the process. Then she gave me some very 10 pages of feedback, which was very helpful. But at that point, I also knew, wow, there's so much work I still need to do. I'm kind of done with it. But I'm happy I sat down for a few days to go through everything and restructure it. But it's definitely a difficult process, is my experience.
But rewarding, right?
But rewarding, 100%.
Yeah.
One of the most rewarding things I've done, I think. There was a lot of individual work though. At some point, I felt like I want to do more things together, more collaborations with other entrepreneurs. But it's definitely rewarding, and by putting your ideas on paper, even if it's just in a journal or wherever, where no one can see it, that helps me a lot to get my ideas out and to create an idea machine. Yeah. And what I like about you seem to have a mindset of, just doing it, just do it. You set a goal. Okay, 10,000 people for the next conference. Let's do it. Let's set a goal and let's try to achieve it. And then you work towards it. Have you ever? Because some people, me included, tend to overthink sometimes. Okay, how will I do it, and is it feasible, and those kind of things. So sometimes I'm overthinking it. So it's inspiring to see you just take action. So I'm wondering if do you have ever have those thoughts?
I have the opposite problem. I completely underthink everything I do, literally everything. It from every aspect of life. I simply just take action. I'm glad that comes through to people outside of just me. But I think early on, I knew if I wanted to learn how to do something, I simply had to do it. And there's obviously still a fear of failure associated with it. But I noticed that once you start doing the thing, it becomes a lot less scary and you actually get so many more ideas. And I also have this thing where once I get an idea, I simply can't keep it to myself. I tell the world. And by the world, I mean publicly announce it. So if I have like a running challenge, I announce it. If I have a book I'm writing, I post about it right away. I know a lot of people want to keep things to themselves and sort of decide, is this a good idea? I might put a book out there and say, I want to write this book. What do you guys think? And then 2 days later, I might change my mind and say, never mind, which actually happened last month. I wanted to write a book. I posted about it. I did a lot of research in that 1, 2 days. And then I decided I'm not as passionate about it as I thought I was. So I sort of pulled the plug. It was about business literacy for data professionals. I'm like, I still think it's a good idea, but I don't think I'm the one to write it. And I think that feedback from the audience is so helpful because then they give you more resources. Then they're like, oh, you should talk to this person. They're doing something similar, or they might be able to help. And doing that sort of like planning out loud and announcing everything you're going to do has led me to so many opportunities. And even publishers would reach out and say, hey, I saw you want to write a book. Maybe we can help. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So I've had a very positive experience. But there were times when maybe I should have thought a little bit more, right? Like when I would announce something and then I'm like, oh, now I have to do it. It's so maybe I should take a little bit of a step back and think before putting out my big goals out there. But so far, it's definitely been more good than bad in my lifetime.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it definitely comes through that you just take action and don't overthink stuff. And I think it's a good trait. It's helpful if you're an entrepreneur, right? Not overthink so much. And I'm wondering, so you have been an entrepreneur for quite a while, and do you have any lessons? Because in the beginning of your life, of course, it may be quite hectic moving to the US and with a new culture, a new language. And so I can imagine that that's not easy, right? So do you attribute any lessons or any traits you have as an entrepreneur or working in data to that period, or what have you? Do you see any links there?
Yeah, I think especially the childhood experience has just taught me to work hard and stay focused on the goals. And I think that sort of stayed with me even now, where if I want to accomplish something, it made me believe that anything is possible. If you simply just start and try. A lot of times people discourage themselves. Well, I can't do this. Like, and I always ask why. Why can't you do it? Why? Tell me. Of course you can do it. Oh, I don't have time. And all the excuses start to pile up. And I'm like, no, no, no. I try to get all the people I know to get whatever thing that thing is in their head, to just get them to actually do it, because I know how good it feels once you've actually accomplished it. But in terms of the entrepreneurial thing, I think growing up, we obviously were not rich, like by any means, right? So we just we were quite on the other side, and I think that was very motivational for me, where I wanted to be more in control of finances, and I wanted to know that we were good, we were financially secure and safe. And I always had that thought in my head where working for a corporation is great. And I spent probably 10 years in the corporate world and I loved it. And it was a good experience. It taught me a lot. But it also taught me that I didn't want to be in a position where I'm relying on an employer. Because as we're seeing these days, lots of layoffs, it's very scary. I feel so bad for people because they put all their eggs in that basket and they're depending on their employer to keep them safe and secure financially. And I think that was a big motivator. Just, I lived through the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. I was graduating college at that time. So that also opened up my eyes into I want to be able to provide for myself in case something happens. So I always wanted to have a business. And now I do, which is great.
Yeah, you managed to.
Yeah.
And what about your kids? You have kids now?
I have two girls. Yes, they're age 6 and 8. They're in school right now. Hopefully not cold.
Do you see them as future entrepreneurs? What do you think? Do you see little entrepreneurs in them?
I would love if that happened. I'll just support them in anything that they choose to do. Right now they are quite young, but I do hear comments from them like, "Oh, why is it that you can go to all my school things or show up all the time?" And some parents can't. So I explained to them the concept of working for yourself and flexible schedules. And they do say that, oh, you're your own boss. And they do notice that. And at some point when they were even younger, they said, I'm glad that you don't work. And I'm like, I don't work. That was the time when I was working the most because I wasn't working in the office. I was working for myself, but I like I said, I wake up at 5, right? I would be working when they're in school, but they don't really see it. So they're like, I'm glad my mom doesn't work. Okay, great.
That's so
If
funny.
you think so.
Yeah. Yeah, some people say if you work for yourself, you have the worst boss.
No, I have the best boss. She's nice. Sometimes, unless there's like a big project due that I don't want to do. And that's the other benefit of being your own boss, right? You get to pick what you're working on. So,
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's one of the best things. That's always the struggle that I had. I was responsible for doing these things, and I was working on also on this and this. So these kind of side projects that people sometimes supported and saw the value, and sometimes they said, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. This is what your job description says. This is what we agreed. Even though I thought, we can also achieve new things. And I had
no, don't
ideas
do
that I
it.
wanted to develop, and that's where my passion comes in. But yeah, sometimes I had some struggles there, and I'm very happy with my own business that I can have more freedom in choosing what to do. Something else I'm curious about is because you've yeah, created this big platform for yourself, dedicated and big following. Um, has it ever led to more stress or worries?
No, honestly, no. It has not led to more stress. It actually leads to more appreciation and just happiness in general. I think I've been lucky enough to avoid any of the sort of trolls or negative experiences that some people have on social media. And I think it might be because I'm not very controversial to begin with. I don't typically come out there and start talking about topics that, half the country or half the world might disagree with. So I think because I stay in this sort of data related topics, I've been able to avoid some of that negativity that some people have faced. So I've been generally pretty happy. I think the only times that I would get stressed is like when LinkedIn is down and it's not refreshing. I'm like, oh, what's happening? That's pretty much it. Everything else is good.
Because of your account is deleted for some reason or hacked, and it's not good.
Yeah, yeah. Or I simply can't get my
Yeah,
work done, right? A
yeah.
lot of my work is I work as a media partner with other data companies to help them with brand awareness. And if I can't do that, then that's my business.
Yeah, exactly. So you rely on that,
Yeah.
or at least you have part of your business there.
Yes.
Something else I wanted to ask you, because we're kind of going to the end of the conversation, is like how can people learn more about this book, about ColorWise? Where can they buy it, find it? Tell us about it.
ColorWise, if you Google ColorWise, it should come up on all the platforms like Barnes& and Nobles, Amazon, O'Reilly. My favorite, I guess, platform is Amazon just because it's so easy and they tend to ship to more locations. Some people have asked if they're in books, if the book is in bookstores. I have no idea. I don't think so. I haven't seen it. I actually went to a local Barnes& and Nobles and pretended I didn't know anything and I asked for this book and they looked it up. They're like, we can order it for you, but it's not in our store. I'm like, okay, can you look up other stores? And she's like, nothing around here. I'm like, okay.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Is there there's no picture of you on the back cover? I wanted to see.
There is no picture of me,
No.
no, which is good because, they saw it. I'm like, is that, are you asking for your own book here? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we go to the closing, I want to do some rapid fire round questions.
Okay, sure, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So the first question is, what's one thing that surprises people about you?
I guess that I am from Tajikistan because they don't know that's a country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the second one, what's your number one place, thing, or person you go for learning?
Learning, LinkedIn, that's just, I get all my news, I get everything from LinkedIn.
And what are some of the best decisions you have ever made?
Um, Decisions. I think going off on my own was probably the best decision. I just wish I made that decision sooner, but that would have to be my favorite decision.
What is the first career you dreamed of as a kid?
I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because that's what my parents said in Tajikistan. I'm like, why that didn't happen.
And then the last one, what job would you be terrible at?
I would be terrible at something that is repetitive and monotonous and just like same thing every day, moving data from point A to point B all day. That would kill me.
Right. Good. Yeah, I see a lot of variation and a lot of need and energy from doing a lot of different things when I see your work, when I see you speak. So I recognize that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely fun to just be all over the place.
Right. And what is one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode, from you or from the book or whatever you want to choose?
Yeah, we talked about the book enough, I think. So I think the main takeaway would be something you mentioned earlier was this just do it attitude. So whatever it is that you're thinking of doing personally or professionally, stop overthinking and just take one small action today, even if that means writing down and in descriptive language the exact goal that you're after, and then slowly putting that into maybe a task list or an action item, steps that you can take, and then start taking action. So just do it, like Nike, right? This is not sponsored by Nike.
It might be.
Hopefully in the future for Gilbert. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if people want more inspiration on how to take action, how not to overthink, they can also follow you, of course. And there's a book coming, Running DATAcated. Can you tell a bit more about your community and the new book that is coming? Can you tell a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an online community called the DATAcated Circle, which is sort of like LinkedIn, but for data professionals. There's a discussion board. There are courses you can take. And then the Running DATAcated is a book that I'm writing currently on Substack. So if you just look for Running DATAcated, you'll find it. But I'm writing the book publicly. So each page that's coming out, that's going to be collated over this whole year. And then hopefully at some point next year, you'll see an actual book called Running DATAcated. It's all about how I'm running my company, how I run my conferences, my live shows, writing books, publishing books, creating LinkedIn courses, and running. So my running adventures are in there as well. So it's been a lot of fun. It's sort of like my business/personal diary.
I'd love to read it, and the title's good, catchy, and
Okay.
it makes sense. It blends in the different activities, the things that you love. So I like it. Well, great. So people can find you on LinkedIn. Any other places you want to, social media you want to shout out?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the main one. Then you can find DATAcated on YouTube, and obviously DATAcated.com for everything else is on that website.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks. Also, thanks for the last big takeaway. It's definitely a lesson I had to learn and still need to relearn because I sometimes are a bit slower in taking action and thinking about, okay, what should be the plan, while actually what brings the results is just doing it, right? And learning on the go and learning while you do it, whether it's analyzing data or building a business. So I appreciate that. That is the takeaway of today. And thank you for your time spending on the MindSpeaking podcast.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me, Gilbert.
Yeah, thanks so much. Last shout out for ColorWise on Amazon. Get it, and you will not regret. Thank you, Kate. And thank you for everyone listening, and speak soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Do you want people to listen to your data and increase your business impact? Then take my free email course or do the quick self-test of your data communication skills. Go to mindspeaking.com and start learning today.